So we have a daughter. Her name is Abby. She's 16 years old. She also has a diagnosis of autism and has developmental delays. And same spunky girl and is learning who she is and growing all the time. So it's pretty fun to watch her grow, and it's also a challenge at times. So, Sandy, we're going to have you go ahead next.
I'm Sandy Anderson, and I am from Fallbrook, California. And my husband Jeff and I have two adult sons. Jared is 33, and he's developmentally delayed along with autism and nonverbal, but understands everything that you say and lives in a group home. And then our younger son Joel has high-functioning autism and is an artist, and they both keep us really busy.
Okay, and we're going to have the Alarcons introduce yourselves next.
Hi guys, I'm Stephanie, and this is my husband Joey, and I'll have him tell you a little bit about his brother Chris.
My oldest brother Chris is 39 years old, and he has Down syndrome. And so that's we're just really thankful to be here and be a part of it.
Yeah.
And Lynette, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Lynette Fuson, and I have a sister, Missy, who is 39, and she has Down syndrome, and she too is very spunky, and she's married and lives with her husband.
Yes. So.
All right, so super. So when we go about doing this, we're going to ask questions to them, and we've already talked with the speakers. And so if you have questions that you want asked, you can go ahead and leave them in the chat, and we'll monitor them. And I think that a lot of the questions will probably be answered ahead of time. So if you just kind of wait, but if you have them come up, we'll look at them. And if they're not answered, then we should have some time at the end as well to be able to. We're kind of generating questions both from a parent's perspective and then also a sibling perspective as we go through this. Mm-hmm. So looking at that. Okay. So we can start with this, talking both from a parent perspective and then also a sibling perspective is, how did you accept your child or your brother or sister's diagnosis and move forward in those early years? So maybe from the parent's perspective first.
Okay, should we go first? We'll go first. I'll start out, okay, guys. You know, I guess for me, you know, at first I was thinking Stephanie's first couple 3 years, I remember just thinking that she was going to kind of snap out of it. And that went all the way until she was, you know, into 4, 5, 6 years old. I thought that things would kind of click at some point and she would, you know, develop, catch up, I guess is the best way to say it. But as far as accepting it, you know, once I realized that, okay, Stephanie is Stephanie and who she is, you know, I would say, you know, God spoke to me really, and basically I took the attitude that, hey, you know, God could have chosen anyone to be Stephanie's parent, and he chose me to be her father. And I looked at that as a you know, an obligation, a privilege, you know, and really kind of decided that I was going to accept that responsibility and be positive about it rather than, you know, dwell on, you know, what could have been or what could be. There's a story, I won't tell it. You guys can look it up, and many of you maybe have heard it. It's called Welcome to Holland, and someone told me that story, and so it really helped to recognize how awesome, you know, Stephanie, you know, how God made Stephanie. So that's my answer to that.
I would say that I welcomed finally having a diagnosis, so that first of all, it just made me realize that what I was seeing or not seeing, it helped me to understand so much more, and it helped me to just get busy and get on the path of getting help for her. So I found it very helpful, and it gave me once we got the diagnosis, gave me a direction of which way to go.
Sandy?
Yeah. Having two, 3 years apart. First, when Jared was born, it was just, he had some medical stuff kind of right off the bat, but it was stuff too that we just thought, okay, this is just early things. He'll just kind of grow out with it. And then he wasn't really developing. He was always a happy little baby, but he wasn't developing. So we kind of went from the doctor saying, oh, he's a boy, he's slow, he'll catch up. 6 months later, they said, take him home, he'll never do anything. And so that was kind of a big shock. And then being in the world of physical therapy doctors and all those types of things. And really, for the first 6 years, they did not know what was going on with Jared. And then during that time, Joel was born, and everything seemed to be typical as far as we knew. And still trying yet to find out a diagnosis for Jared. And they sent, to make a really long story, very, very short, they sent us to a diagnostic center where they had us for an entire week, our whole family together. And at the end, they came out and said, we think both your boys have autism. Mm-hmm. And we went, excuse me, what? Both? And what's autism? Mm-hmm. And so I just remember driving home from LA going, we left with one child with special needs and we came home with two. Mm-hmm. And that really rocked my world, because back then nobody knew anything about autism. We didn't have the internet back then. Mm-hmm. You know, that was just beginning, and the one autism conference in all of California. And so it was really sharp learning curve back then, and finding people to reach out. And in fact, we were all in Bible study together back then with the Sherry and Steve Monas way back when newlyweds. Mm-hmm. And but I just remember going, I'm not going to hide my children under a rock. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to let God use them no matter what it was. And it's been amazing. It's been hard, but there's been just as many amazing blessings too.
That's beautiful. Speaking to the siblings, what were those early years like for you as siblings with another sibling with special needs?
For me, I was 9 years old when Missy was born, and it was just like having a baby doll. I have a younger brother that's halfway in between us, and my parents really just, when they shared with us that Missy had Down syndrome, of course we didn't have any idea what that meant, and that's an early diagnosis, unlike autism, and so you have a little bit more of an idea what to expect early on. And really, she had extra doctor's appointments, but as a child, they worked really hard to prioritize what my brother and I were doing, as well as the special needs that they had to implement for Missy. And gosh, as an older sister, it was just fun because I got to dress her up and play with her. And my parents did a good job with trusting me within reason to be able to help with her and care for her. So in many ways, it was like parent training for me, because I got to be so involved in the early years of her growing up. And so early on, it was just really a sweet thing.
Joey?
So we have siblings that are the same age, same diagnosis of Down syndrome. I was on the flip side of that. I was 9 years younger. Mm-hmm. And so by time I was aware, or, you know, even self-aware in any way, he was in high school or becoming an adult. So for me, it was kind of, I never really knew any different. I just knew my parents kind of just treated him just as any other one of the kids. And when I did start becoming aware, I even started having feelings of like, at times like, hey, it's kind of mean. They're like really on him super hard right now about like taking out the trash or something like that, you know, and he's getting flustered and, you know, tearing up. And then, you know, now I realize now how the high expectation that they had for all of us, including Chris, really paid off now, like being able to work a job or have some of those adult responsibilities that have let him enjoy some of the other independent things in life. So that was my experience growing up. And I quickly became a protector. You know, by the time I was 10, 12 years old, you know, it's kind of the thing when anyone messed with Bobo, they were going to get it from me or my brothers or the wrestling team or whoever. So that's what it was like for us.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I think for the parents, while raising your family, how'd you balance the time, energy, and financial needs of work, family, self-care, and then caretaking for your child as well?
You go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had a formula that worked for us. We had made a decision that we were married for 4 or 5 years before Stephanie was born, and we both worked, and we saved every penny we could so that when we started having kids, that Sherry could potentially stay home or maybe work part-time, and I could focus on my career. And so we kind of had a plan going in. So it kind of worked out well as far as that goes. We had the energy to you really did, project manage Stephanie's life basically is what ended up happening, and I focused on on my career. So that formula kind of worked well for us.
So balance is a tricky word. And so, at any point in time, you might feel like you got balance in one area, but not in the other. I really think in terms of how to try to do it all, so to speak, is, I know most of you have probably already heard this, but you really taking care of yourself so that you are able to deal with whatever comes your way, and you're not depleted. If you take care of yourself, get your sleep, eat healthy, exercise. I know that sounds sort of cliche, but it's true. Those things are going to help you, because when the hard times come, you don't want to be already sort of depleted and your tank empty, because then you have nothing. You're burning the candle at both ends, and you just have nothing. You don't have the resources that you need, and the energy and the clarity and thought to handle what might come your way. So I think that that's part of what goes into balancing everything. Some days it just feels like you put out fires all day, and the priorities are constantly changing, especially if you have other children in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe?
Yeah. Sandy, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, those are awesome, wise words, Sherry. Yeah, being in this now 33 years, it's easy to look back and go. The one thing I remembered when my kids were little was, I'm not going to become that old frumpy mom. I became the old frumpy mom, but only because both of my kids had erratic sleep schedules. They never slept at the same time. I didn't sleep for 18 years because I was always afraid one was going to get up and run out or be in the fridge. There was always something. Moms were always on hyper alert. And then, like Steve said, we're project managing all the doctors, all the therapists, all the, what's the latest research? What's the schools going on? What's your IEPs and regional centers and vision therapy? I did everything. Except the intravenous pig therapy, hemoglobin something or other was the only therapy I didn't do. I did all the rest, and literally lived in dog years, and prided myself on living in dog years because I could get so much done in 1 year versus other people, but it took a toll. And a lot of us moms end up getting fibromyalgia, cancer, autoimmune disorders, different things like that. And so it's just really important, to listen to what Sherry said. Yes, our kids need us, but they need us to take care of us. And so I would talk to my younger self now and say, you don't need to do all the therapies. You know, just be wise and ask the Lord to show you which one and to where you put your finances to. When we talked about finances, you know, because you could easily, you know, sell your house and do all the things that you think you need to do, but that's not a wise thing to do either. So it really is important to just slow down and ask the Lord, how do you want us to raise our kids? What's the priority for each? And it's going to be different for each of your kids. And to, as a family, my husband worked a lot of hours and usually worked at a distance far away. And so sometimes, like when one of our kids was sick or had surgery, we would set up a schedule so I could sleep the first part of the night and he'd sleep the other half of the night. So at least somebody got sleep, you know. So tag teaming those things are really important as a team to do that. But when you're a single mom or when the dad doesn't buy in to it and you're doing it on your own, you know, it's then, you know, getting the helps of the regional centers and different things like that for respite and whatnot. But it's just really comes down to asking Jesus, you know, what do you have for me to do for this child, and help me take care of myself at the best of my ability. Because my one word of wisdom on this is going to be, do the best that you can do each day. One day you're going to have a lot of best that you can give because you're feeling stronger and with it and all together. And some days you're only going to have this much of the best of your ability. And that's what God just asks of us. And he will bless that in taking care of your kids.
That's right, for sure. For the siblings, how did being a sibling of a child with special needs affect you during those school years and with your friendships when you were younger?
It didn't have much effect. Most of my friends were pretty bought in. So we would like play wiffle ball in the backyard, and there was always an open invite. So that wasn't as much of an issue for me. If anything, he was in some ways kind of the cooler older brother because of that 9-year gap. So that was our experience.
Your friends loved him and love him to this day.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Anything you want to share, Lynette?
Yeah, similar for me. I remember coming home from school one day, and one child was teasing my sister, and one of her friends came up to me and just said, why are they talking to her that way? She's just a normal kid. And it was really sweet to see that even Missy's friends saw her as being one of them. And so I think that was very much my perspective growing up, that, you know, this is the way God made her, and we're going to celebrate that. And she was able to fit in where she could. And Sherry and Sandy, I so appreciate what you're saying about taking care of yourself. Oh my goodness. I know my mom had someone come in and stay with Missy on Sunday mornings so that she could go to church. We now have a special needs program at our church where the kids are taken care of on the church campus, and I wish that had been available at the time. But to anything you can do, moms and dads, to take care of yourself, that will help you to be the best for your child.
Absolutely. I would add early on, similar to hearing the Holland story, which I recommend you look up as a parent. We heard the story of, you know, it's just like when you are on an airplane ride, and as a parent, you take that oxygen mask first because you're not going to be able to help your child if you're not doing well. And so self-care is not selfish. It is a must. It is really an important thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And it kind of leads into this next question. You know, what kind of advice do you guys have for marriage? You guys have been weathered many storms, I think, and so being able to speak from that platform is huge. What advice do you have?
I'll start, Eric. You know, I think just real quick, back to the previous topic of, you know, taking care of ourselves. we're talking like we actually did it all the time. There were a lot of this is because we weren't successful.
Yeah.
We didn't take care of ourselves. We didn't eat right. We didn't exercise. We were, burning the candle at both ends. So we didn't have the energy. So, and we now know what that did to us. So, I guess the advice, that I would say for marriage would be to really recognize that, forgiveness and compromise with each other is got to be a hallmark of your marriage. You just have to have. It's so hard raising a special needs child. There's so many challenges, and if you don't have forgiveness in your heart, and if you aren't willing to compromise with your spouse, it's just going to be trouble. So you kind of have to. I think you just kind of have to come to a realization that that's just got to be a part of your marriage is because you're going to make mistakes. We're going to blow it. You're going to blow it with our spouse. I mean, I know I did. You did a lot less than I did, but it's easy to have a short fuse, to lose your temper with each other, and so just to kind of have that foundation of forgiveness and understanding what it means to compromise would be my advice. Again, really easy to say and extremely hard to do. So
yeah. Sometimes having a sense of humor is the best way to get through the days. It really is. And actually mostly to have a sense of humor about yourself. I just find myself saying some of the things I say that come out of my mouth. I just think, so, but I do think that it helps to put it into perspective, to have a sense of humor and with your spouse, if that's the case, and to give a lot of grace. I know that I certainly have needed it, and a lot of times because you can't share your frustration with your child, he gets it, and so I think grace and just understanding, being able to step back in the moment and looking at the big picture of what's probably going on helps before we speak. That helps with marriage because it's just it's just hard. So as you probably know, so.
I think I would add from our perspective that date nights have been invaluable. We were told pretty early on in the tougher years to make that a priority, and we did that and are continuing to do that. And it's just, there's so many weeks where there's no opportunity to talk even about the regular everyday things, and or to have any kind of heart to heart. And so, even if that just means being in our bedroom having our date night, not even getting out, it's just been really important for us. So Sandy, did you want to add anything?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. All the wisdom you guys have shared already, I second that. Another thing I would suggest too is play to each other's strengths and what you're gifted in. My husband's very good at the financials and the numbers and keeping all those things organized. And so it's like, okay, you do, and medical insurances, you do all that stuff. And I do IEPs and go to the doctor's appointments and those types of things. And so that helped instead of both of us trying to do both things, that just didn't make any sense. And so that helped when we finally figured that out. And then things like, when you're mom, if you leave your child with dad to go away for the weekend, because you need to do that, you need to go pick another girlfriend here and go away for the weekend. But you're like, but wait a minute, dad's not going to do the diapers the way I do or give the meds the way I do. That's okay. 9 times out of 10, you will come home and your child will be fine. And you need that time away, and dad needs that time knowing that he can do it and be just fine and take care of the kids too, and call in reinforcements if he needs help. But you need to make that time and let it be okay. If it's not the same way that you do it, that's okay. That's all the better for the kids to learn flexibility and ways of other people doing things, because those of our kids that are on the autism spectrum often like routine and sameness. And so if it's always done the exact same way, if for some reason we can't be there, then our kid's going to fall apart if they haven't learned how to do it differently sometimes. So, like I said, use each other's strengths. Definitely a sense of humor. Sherry and I are a lot alike. We just need to have the joy, and the Lord can bring that joy and help us find humor in the funniest things, and maybe things that nobody would ever laugh at in a special needs family. We can do that because we get it, you know, and those times that you need to cry together, and be real and let that be okay. It's not right to keep it all stuffed in either. So,
Yeah. This question is for really both parents' perspective and sibling perspective. What were those adolescent puberty years like for you as a parent, parenting through that? You know, what kind of advice might you have with that? And then as a sibling, living with that, and also being maybe a teenager yourself while you were going through it. So two different perspectives there. I think we'll start with the parents' perspective, and then we'll shift to the siblings.
hang on. All I can say, hang on. And it's every parent goes through it with their typical kids and their kids with special needs. Yeah, it can be rocky. It's crazy, but this too shall pass. You know, sometimes it takes our guys longer though. My guys, sometimes we're at least 5 years developmentally behind physically than neurotypical. So, you know, we're just starting now to cruise into the 30s. So yeah, it's hard to say, okay, wait till they're in their 20s. That seems a long time, but it does mellow out. You can start to get in a routine. Expect the dramatic, expect the, you know, anger and outbursts and tears and all those different things. And I think if you're prepared as much as you can be and know that it can be tumultuous, I can't even say it, that instead of going that, oh, life is over, life isn't over. You'll get through it. They'll get through it. And I would add, watch things though that like sugar and, you know, their diet and things that you put in their system, because that can definitely exacerbate problems. So we found that citrus and oranges made our kids really, really cranky. So a little thing like that, it just happened to be that aggravated them. So we didn't give it to them during those years, you know, because that made it worse. So things like that you can watch out for, that can help them feel better.
I think having a typical developing adolescent was harder to raise than a special needs one, but that's okay. Our son was a lot harder at adolescence, but with our daughter, well, it's interesting that what you mentioned about foods. I'm actually at 30 years old, Stephanie being 31 years old. We just have kind of uncovered how if she doesn't have sugar after a certain time in the afternoon, she'll sleep through the night. But if she eats sugar later or closer to bedtime, she's up a lot during the evening. So, I think there is something to these different things and how they react, your siblings or your kids, how they react to them in their bodies. The adolescence years are hard. Hormones are hard. Their hormones are raging and they're confused, and You know, they don't really know what's going on. As much as you can in terms of their ability to understand, being straightforward is probably a good route to go. Otherwise, you know, you end up having to continue to explain things to them into their 20s and 30s. And it should, I think it's easier just right out of the chute to call it what it is, call the body parts what they are, and tell them exactly what's going on with their bodies. Because it's almost just out of respect for them. You know, it just, it's a better way to handle it than to have them going into their 30s and still calling their bodily functions things that, you know, kids would refer to as and things like that. So, because then you end up undoing what you spent a lot of years teaching them. So,
You know, I think you know, obviously because Stephanie's a girl, you know, you were in charge of a lot of those issues when it came to puberty and adolescence and just that whole process. But what I remember about those years, and really kind of related but kind of unrelated, was Stephanie's social inappropriateness. You know, we really struggled with that. She was really socially inappropriate, and I don't mean in any kind of, you know, sexual way or anything like that, but more in terms of how she would just act around people, around peers, and around other people, and so we really had a lot of work to do. So we spent a lot of time during those her preteen and teen years helping her with social appropriateness. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think that you got to put a lot of energy into that, depending on, you know, where your child is. But there's lots of tools to help with that. We used a lot of them, and she really progressed. I mean, she really has you know, we didn't want to leave her alone with anybody, just not knowing what she would say or do. And now, you know, she's gotten through a lot of that and learned a lot of that. So that's what I remember more about those years than, you know, the adolescence.
Yeah.
Like you said with our son, you know, we had plenty of issues with him, but that's another story.
But that is a good point. I think that the adolescent years are where they probably experience the most isolation in terms of their with peers, relationships, and things like that. You know, so it's a tough time for them. And, you know, like with our daughter, she would say really socially awkward things, and even family members, cousins, and things like that, they wouldn't know how to react to it. So it can be a very isolating time for them. I think it's, you know, one of the advantages now is that there are more peer groups that have been formed throughout, probably, you know, the county, where it's they probably feel more comfortable in being with their peers. So.
Mm-hmm. And Joey and Lynette, you know, from your perspective as siblings, what were those teenage years like?
For Chris, I think one of the most helpful things through high school in that time was having groups, and for him it was sports. So he was on the wrestling team, and when I say on the wrestling team, I mean he wasn't competing. Although they did every now and then stage a match, you know, and he would go on the mat in his singlet and stuff. But it was those groups of support where he always felt like he was part of a team and there were people looking out for him. And another group was band. He played the trumpet and was in marching band, and the director didn't let him go on the field, but he, you know, was on the sideline, and, you know, what else? So he was acquainted with a lot of the football players, and, you know, he was just part of a lot of groups. And I think that really helped get him through high school, for him to feel part of it. And like, he always talks to this day if you talk to him, he'll say, oh, my friend, this guy or this guy from high school or on the football team, as if everyone knows them, because they're, to him, they were celebrities. And that was, and he still looks back so fondly on that time period. And I think that was just really helpful for him to feel a part of the group and to have someone had his back all the time. And so, not every kid, they don't have to be athletically inclined. And then when I went through the same school on the wrestling team, there was a kid with autism who I kind of took under my wing, and he was like the team manager, so to speak, like did water, did some of the clothing stuff, but he traveled with us, and he was oftentimes in the stands playing on his Game Boy or playing Pokemon, but he was still part of the team, and we had his back at school, and that was, he wore the sweatshirt with the team name on it, and that was something that really helped. And then to this day, being in Special Olympics and having peers that are like him. And he's very self-aware too. When he sees like a toddler with Down syndrome, he knows, he can tell based on the facial features, and he'll kind of perk up and he'll be like, hey Joey, look, there's a kid with Downs, like we should go talk to him. And he'll go and say hi and, say hi to the parents and stuff. So I think those are some things that's what I remember from those years of him. And it is still to this day kind of a highlight for him that he always just looks back on and has a piece of identity in being part of the group. So.
And I would add, is there anything during those teenage years, Lynette and Joey, that you struggled with having a sibling at that age, or that you remember your parents doing that really supported you well as you were coming alongside your sibling? Anything to that you want to speak to?
Kind of back to your first question, and I'll lean into that a little bit as well. Like Chris, Missy really thrived throughout high school. She had a great friendship group. She was part of something called Silent Witness, which is they performed to music using sign language. And so she knew American Sign Language and really just thrived in that. And that became her group that she was part of. And my mom worked her tail off to get her through high school, and she had some special ed classes and that kind of thing, but really just supported her as much as she could through that. And I remember helping her, and my dad was a teacher, and so we all worked together to help Missy through high school. And she graduated a year late. She repeated one grade, but that was it. But things kind of unraveled at that point as friends went off and got married. I got married when she was 13, and so I had left the home. My brother left a few years later for college and then got married. So I think as her world started to disappear, in a sense, things became more and more difficult. And I remember saying to my mom, is she 5? Is she 13? Is she 20? I'm sure you've all had that conversation before. And my mom's response would always be yes. And it was frustrating because I didn't know what to expect at what point in time. And I think when she was younger, that worked. But as she got older, as she approached 20, and I had kids, and she was Aunt Missy, and she was allowed to tell my kids what to do, even though she didn't necessarily have the common sense to really instruct them or guide them. That's where it started to become difficult, because my parents had worked, and I really, really respect my parents and the work that they put into raising her. And I know it had to have been so difficult, but there were some times that it became very challenging for me and my husband with our own kids, because all of a sudden this aunt who was less cognitively capable than my own kids were trying to tell them what to do. And so I feel like the teenage years were tumultuous to a certain degree, like teenage years are, but I've raised 4 boys, so, They all have their ups and downs, right? It was more when she approached late teens, early 20s that things became more difficult because the rest of the world was flying forward, and she thought that she should be able to keep up with everyone else. And my parents basically told her she could. And so that created some real challenges. Those things that she used to thrive in no longer existed. And so she started to scramble to find her place, to figure out who she was. And the only benchmark that she had was to be like me or my brother, to get married, to have kids, to become a school teacher, or whatever it was that we were doing at the time. So that's kind of the point where things became difficult for us. So sorry if I jumped into another question there.
We're definitely going to talk about that because that is another phase in life that affects everything, for sure.
So one of the things is having a child, whether it's on the spectrum or special needs of any kind, it takes so much time, and we've already mentioned balance with the family. So then what deliberate things did you do, say, with the typical peer, typical child you might have had to nurture that relationship? Because a lot of times I know they feel left out of the equation because the other one demands so much time and energy.
Yeah, that's a good question. That was we were blessed. It was very easy for us because we have one other child. Stephanie's brother is 3 years younger than she is, so he's 28. So he was really into sports, very active in the sports scene. So that's really where I spent a lot of time with him. It kind of worked out where I was, my time was working and spending the time with Michael, and then Sherry got to spend a lot of time with Stephanie. We did a lot together too as a family, and Michael had his own experience as a sibling. They were closer in age than Joey and Chris and Lynette and Missy, so it was a little different. He kind of had I call it an indifference towards his sister. He wasn't mad at her, angry with her. He wasn't embarrassed by her. In fact, he was, he understood and was very appropriate around special needs people. So, but I would say he was kind of indifferent. So that was his experience. But I spent a lot of time with him in his sports, and going to games, coaching, working with him. So we had that common thing. And so that helped us a lot, for sure, keeping him involved. Now, I don't know what he would say. Maybe he would say, he's pretty easygoing guy now. And, he's pretty, everything's great. So I think it was a good experience for him. And I think that really helped that he was, that we had that common thing.
I think, so that being the case with us, I'm working now to have a relationship with him as an adult. Not that we don't have one, but I feel like a lot of my time was spent with what Stephanie needed. And as he was younger, I think he liked having his dad around because I don't know a lot about sports, other than if I like the colors that their team is. So that's about it. So anyway, I'm finding myself now trying to develop that relationship with him. So that might be one of the unintended consequences of our family dynamics. So,
Sandy, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I don't have a typical peer son, so we went out and found some.
Yeah.
Not knowing what anything was. Most of our subject we haven't touched, and I don't know if it's a question that's coming up, is we don't have a very big family, extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and that, and most of them moved away. Half of our family decided they didn't want to be around us. We lost friends, we lost family. And so there wasn't that support. It was just kind of the four of us. And our two boys did not do well together. One in his autism is hypersensitive. The other one in their autism is hyposensitive. And so everything was different. And each of them, their things aggravated the other one. So it was very difficult, still is to this day, for them to be together. A meal, if we get the four of us together, although right now Jared's been on lockdown since since March in his group home, have not been able to touch him. Joel has not been able to see him. Jeff hasn't been able to see him. So it's really changed the dynamics of our family. But we work with the Autism Tree Project Foundation, and we helped start a football mentor program with football players who at the time they were peers of my kids. And so we adopted many football players as our sons, and several of them have stuck after all these years and are our family. They go on vacation with us. They come on holidays. They come to town to come see us. One's in Japan and one's in Texas now. In fact, I talked to 3 of my football players today. They were all just texting in. But they taught us what neurotypical guys their age would do. I could call them and go, okay, is this normal? Should my son be doing this? Or can you teach him how to do that? Can you teach him how to talk to a girl? You know, all those types of things. That was just so hard because I was clueless. And so those boys have been our lifeline, and not having a typical peer, my heart of going, what happens when Jeff and I are gone? Who's going to watch over our kids? Right now, it's the fiduciary is the name on the conservatorship, because none of our family wants that responsibility. But our 2 football players have said, Mom, don't worry. We will always watch out for the boys. So I know that's a question we'll talk about later, that responsibility you as siblings have, or what your parents, you know, asked of you or didn't ask of you. But that's a really tough life question. And that's where a lot of just trusting in Jesus. A lot of what we do is just, you know, just giving our heart and trusting to Jesus with everything.
That's right, for sure. 100%. For the siblings, and Lynette, you started to speak to this, and this is a something that comes up for sure, is that you know, what would you like to share about that transition of living with your family as a sibling and having your sibling with special needs, and then transitioning into being an adult yourself, and what was that like for you? To transition out of the home, to have that independence, to sort of have that separate identity from your family, and not necessarily having your sibling there. If you want to speak to that time frame in life.
Yeah, it was good. I don't remember that being significantly impacted by Missy, for positive or negative. I hoped that my parents, as much as they looked for opportunities to care for themselves, oftentimes it didn't end up happening. I can remember one time we lived in Bakersfield, and my parents dropped Missy off at our house on the way up there. They were going to go up to Northern California and go on a trip for a few days, which I was thrilled, because that was just something they didn't take the opportunity to do. They would do things with friends or shorter periods of time, but they wouldn't leave Missy overnight very often, unless she was maybe going to camp with church or something like that. She was going to help me lead the children's program with sign language, and she was going to teach the kids some music and that kind of thing. Well, they got a couple hours past our house and discovered that she had left all of her music in the car. And my mom called me, and I said, don't worry about it. You know, not a problem. Go enjoy your vacation. Well, a couple hours later, they showed up at our doorstep. And that was kind of the end of their trip. And it just made me so sad that that burden of making sure that she was cared for oftentimes ended up trumping what what they needed as a couple. And so I think I had eyes to see that once I was married. And so I had a different perspective on that, realizing, wow, this is a bigger impact on my parents than probably I'd recognized growing up, because she was always just my little sister, and she was part of the family. But then when I started my own family, I started to see the burden and the weight that it was on my own parents.
Well, and to add to that, kind of moving into that as well, when you, because both of you are married, Lynette, you're married, you have kids, and Joey and Stephanie, you guys are married, and you have a little guy. What, was that transition like as well for you, and then also for your sibling? What did you notice about them transitioning into that next phase of life as siblings? And do you have any advice for that time frame too? What did you see? Those kind of things.
I'll speak to this a little, and I'm afraid this is where it becomes a little bit negative, and I don't want it to come across that way. But it's been challenging. My sister was, as I mentioned earlier, if I could share anything to encourage parents, I would say help your child be the person God made them to be. And that may not be like your other kids. Your special needs child is special and has amazing gifts. And to the extent that you can help that child thrive within those gifts and be who God made them to be, that I would hope would be the goal. One of the challenges for us is that Missy was striving, and she was encouraged to be who I was and who my brother was. And that created a competition that realistically didn't impact my brother and me, because we didn't see it as competition, but Missy saw it as competition. So she was constantly striving to be to get married, to have kids, to be a school teacher. And because of that, my mom got her through college, and she has a degree that she didn't earn, and things like that, Missy now is constantly scrambling and never is at a point where she's, I don't want to say she's not successful, but she is constantly trying to do things that are beyond her reach. And that's made it difficult. And so with that really impacted her relationship with my kids, like I mentioned earlier, because she wanted to be the same aunt that my brother's wife was. And yet she wasn't physically or mentally capable of doing some of the things for my kids that that my sister-in-law was able to do. And so that produced a lot of frustration. And Missy's very strong-willed, and she became very demanding. Just to kind of complete the story, my mom passed away 2 years ago, and a couple months later, my sister eloped. She just has kind of made up her mind that she is going to accomplish certain goals, but in so doing, she rejects help. And so one of the things that I'm sure it's more complicated than I can even perceive, but I wish my parents would have given Missy the perspective that my brother and I were her advocate, that we would fight for her, that we would do everything we possibly could for her. But instead, she wanted to be independent. And so we don't have conservatorship. And that's produced a lot of angst and a lot of challenges. And so I know there's a balance, and I really say this carefully as a sibling and not as a parent. I know as parents, you want your special needs child to be the very most they can possibly be. But within that, if those goals and expectations could be reachable and doable, personally, I think the child will be much more fulfilled and will be in a position where they can accept help in ways that sadly I don't see my sister accepting help that I long to give her, and yet even legally I can't give her.
Lynette, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that that's really valuable for us as parents to know going into those stages and ages as we're raising our kids. So thank you. Joey, do you have anything to add to that sort of transition into life, adulthood, getting married to Stephanie, having your first little guy?
Yeah, looking back, I can see more of how having Chris as a brother impacted some of those decisions that I made. Even the decision to stay local, to go to college. Those were really important years for him and I. You know, me as an adult being able to drive and take him to do things, and you know, having those 4 years was really important and special for our relationship. So for him, he just had his roles just changed. So, you know, he was the oldest brother, and then he became the best man at the wedding, and then he became the uncle. And so just changing those roles, and, you know, he always has something to kind of take pride in and do. And so that was kind of how the transition went for him in those stages.
And he's very
Yeah.
strong-willed too, and but it's flipped where he's the older brother, and so everybody needs to live up to his expectation. You know, like he's setting the mold. So, so it's, you know, flipped in that way. But I do, you know, just speaking to what Lynette was saying, it is a difficult and very careful balance of guiding and, you know, loving your brother or sister or your child with special needs in that way of just really honing in, like Sandy was saying, on their gifts and, well, you were saying it in marriage with their strengths, but also, you know, in relating to your children and to your sibling, of just looking at what are the things that they're strong in, and then pushing them in that, you know, in that area, and just being very real about it too. That's been awesome just for us to see, and teaching Chris what an uncle does, and, you know, pushing him in that role too. But it's just been special to have, you know, I feel like I have a very unique and very, just honored to like be, you know, to be his sister-in-law. And that was something very early on in Joey and I, you know, before we were even really talking about marriage. You know, his mom kind of pulled me aside and sat me down at the dining room table and said, "Hey, you know that Chris is going to be with Joey." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know," you know, and just like that's something that like I look forward to. It's going to be hard, you know, and maybe he won't, and maybe he'll, you know, be with his parents and, or be a traveling uncle, but I'm excited to, like, you know, look at those years and see what that's going to be like. And so just hearing all of the perspectives that you guys have, you know, in marriage and being a sibling is just really valuable.
And thank you.
And that definitely was like for Chris and mine's relationship, like him and I have kind of always been a package deal. And it wasn't any pressure that my parents really put on me. I can't remember a time when I ever had to be told that that's what was going to happen, but he has a great relationship with my other brother and my sister. But that's just always kind of been assumed. And I think my parents really modeled in a way that looking back, I never saw him as a burden to them. And so I think I've never viewed him as a potential burden to me. And I see him as, you know, he's changed he's one of the main reasons for just a perspective on life, on a gratefulness and perspective of being thankful for the things I have and can do. And I want my kids now to grow up with him, to give that to them. That's a gift that we all get by being, you know, part of their life and seeing them. there's a humility there that, was really molding for me growing up. But I know that that's a really probably difficult thing as parents to think of. Sandy, in your case, there are no other blood siblings, or maybe there's, maybe that is a huge burden based on the other's aspirations or things. And so that's definitely, a really challenging thing to deal with.
Mm-hmm. And I just appreciate too, Stephanie, you're speaking to coming into the picture as, marrying into the family. And Lynette, maybe you have a story about, that time with Jason coming into the family, but, that's something we haven't experienced yet. And we think about all the time we, pray for our son's future spouse, that they would have that love for Abby and be able to just be a part of the family completely and be ready for that.
Appreciate who she is.
Yeah.
And you guys have said that. What you say, they have so much to teach us, and to be around people that embrace that and see what that is, see that their gifts are different and unique, and it's not a disability, it's a gift. Yeah, it was really huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this is kind of geared more to the parents. What advice might you have with dealing with schools and IEPs?
Sandy, I bet you have a lot of information on that one.
Oh, goodness, it's been so long since I've been out of the school district now. Back in the day, I was young. I was 23 when I had Jared. So I was really young myself and hadn't finished school and all that. So tackling all that as just a young woman was really hard for me. So being really with the school districts when they were 3, started getting the school districts and things like that, and IEPs, because back then there weren't a lot of services, and so there weren't autism services, there weren't autism programs, they were just beginning. So we had to fight for a lot of them. California Avenue School did not have an autism program. We started it. My son started it. So I don't know how many of you are in Vista, San Marcos area or not, but all those things were started from IEPs and mediations and different things from myself and my friends, and going to bat for what was out there. And but I wasn't, I'm not an intellectual thinker and remembering the laws and all those types of things, but I am clever. So I did make myself a notebook that looked so professional, and I carried around Wright's book of special needs laws and all that, and I had it all in there. So when I walked into an IEP meeting, I looked like I knew what I was talking about. Didn't have a clue, but I looked like it. So that's half the battle of just going in and looking the part so you don't get walked all over. Not always do they have your child's best interests. It's all about money for some of them and what they can provide and what they don't want to provide and those types of things. Sometimes I did things right and sometimes I did not do things right. And I had to go back and apologize to some people. And that was very important because I did remember from the very beginning that these people would very likely be in my child's life for their whole life. And those circles would come back around again and we would see some of those people again. And sure enough, we did. So it was very important for me that when I was in the IEP room, I was in the IEP room. And I reminded them of that. I said, I'm here as an advocate for my child. I am also their mother. But what happens in the boardroom happens in the boardroom. I should be able to go out and see you on the street and say hi and how's your kids and really be genuinely kind and not adversarial. But when I was in the boardroom and I had to fight for something, I had to fight for it. Always politely, always kindly, You know, I didn't rant and rave. Yes, sometimes I'd have to get up and excuse myself and go in the bathroom and cry, pull myself together and come back out again. But I am very thankful that even like I said, I didn't always do it right. I tried to do it the best of my ability. Sometimes I had to take people with me because you're a mom, you're going to hear it from an emotional point of view. You're going to hear the negatives. You're not going to hear the positive. And so it always helped to have, if it wasn't a friend, if it was something that was more difficult of situation, sometimes I had to have advocates and different things like that go with us, just because like back in the day, they didn't have the programs. So we really did have to fight. Now I hear people at the drop of a hat going, I'm hiring my lawyer and it's my first IEP meeting. No, you know, don't do that. You know, that just sets you up for fighting the battle and they're thinking that you're a crazy mom. So don't let them think that. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, when Joel graduated from high school, we had a huge party and we didn't tell everybody that we invited, but when we invited his preschool teachers, his aides, his speech therapists from preschool all the way through high school, we had somebody from every year of his life and we honored them. It was like the Academy Awards and everyone that came through got a Joel trophy. We had the Chinese Man Theater. We had the El Dorado. We had the red carpet, everything. He put his hand in the cement, you know, the whole thing. But we honored all those people because he would not have gotten where he was without all the people on Team Joel across his life. And I think if I had been an obnoxious, crazy mom, I wouldn't have had all those people and couldn't have honored and blessed them. And so many of them showed up. And those people are still in our lives today. And I am just thrilled for that. Was it always easy? Absolutely not. Was there some I would love to take out to the woodshed? Absolutely. But it was just, you have to learn to pick your battles and always just try to be, you know, assertive, fair. Times when I had to ask for things, I would know, okay, I wanted, just say for instance, 20 hours of therapy for a week or a month or whatever. I would go in and ask double, knowing that then they would say, I can only give you, you know, I'd ask for 40 and they say, I'm sorry, I can only give you 20. And I'd be like, oh, really? You can only give me 20? But knowing I really only wanted 20 in the first place. So sometimes I had to learn the art of the deal and a little bit of manipulation, or I had to say, I had some crazy special ed directors. Sherry, you probably had some of the same ones. These people are there to save money. That's most of the time, that's why they're there. And so sometimes I just had to be creative and say, Mrs. So-and-so, remember that idea that you had for Jared about doing this, you know, OT? That was such a good idea. Let's go with that. And she'd be like, oh, yeah. Let's do that. I'm like, it was never her idea. It was okay. I didn't need the glory. It was, but if it helped them feel like they were in charge and in control, and it was, you know, everything has to be fair and appropriate. You can't ask for the best, you know, you just learn the wording, you know, so you kind of play the IEP game, but be honest and fair and kind, and always assume competence in your child. It's very difficult to go in when they're looking at what they can't do. They can't do this, they can't do that, you know, measurable goal, can't do this. And it's very disheartening of hearing somebody, and we had multiple IEPs. And I not only had two, they both had at least two IEPs a year. So I at least had 4 IEPs a year of them going, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this, they can't do that. Nowadays, people are much more proactive and person-centered and things like that. So I'm so thankful for that shift. But take leadership in that and own that with your kids. Love on your teachers. It's not easy for them. They got a ton of paperwork to do, and nowadays with, you know, COVID, God bless you all, trying to, my heart has just been praying for you, moms and dads, going through this right now, because it's just such a unique, crazy time. But just use the time. I'm always open if anybody ever wants to call. I mean, I know laws and things have changed a lot since my kids were there, but there's so many people that you can reach out to. Just don't do it alone. That would be my thing. You've got this wonderful group here with Kristen and Eric, and reach out to them, and Sherry and Steve and I mean, we're happy to support you guys, knowing that you're not alone going through this in the IEP, and don't let it be scary and daunting. So,
You know,
and
right
when you're all done, wait, I got one more thing, Steve. And then when you're all done and they graduate when they're 18 or 22, whether they get a diploma or whether they age out, and they hand you that box of CUME files when you get home. I have cases filled with CUME. Back in the day, they were 3 sheets. So we had a yellow sheet, a pink sheet, and a white sheet, you know, and everybody got them. And so you had 3 sets of everything. And so literally we just had a shredding party, and we just shredded tons of IEPs. And it was such a happy day to be all done with that. But, you know, you see the progress that the kids made, and you just thank the Lord for even the little things. Because my Jared, he's still learning at 33. He's still learning new things all the time. So don't ever think a teacher can say, has to learn it now, or he's never going to learn it, or they're too old. You can't have that on an IEP. Say, no, you know what? We're still going to try to learn it, and just a little bit at a time. And so they never stop learning. We never stop learning, right? So neither do your kids. And it's okay. You're going to get there. You're going to get there, and we're all going to be here with you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say along the same lines, or along what you're talking about, Sandy, is, and you guys are doing this already, so we don't have to tell you, connect as much as you can. We made a huge investment on connecting with everybody we possibly could that was in the special needs community. Gathered information. We joined groups. We joined organizations. We talked to people. I mean, it's how we got to know you. That's how we got to know everybody. Joey through through Special Olympics and the Poway community. The special needs community is vibrant in most areas of San Diego. So, but you guys are doing that now. You're on a you're involved tonight. So just connect as much as you can and get as much information as you can, because all of that stuff with the IEPs and the advocates. I mean, an advocate can potentially be a good avenue for you. But, if you do talk to people, you'll just get more information. So that's obvious, and you guys are already doing it.
Yeah. Also, too, I just wanted to add quickly that Sandy, as you mentioned, the amount of paperwork, the papers and the files you'll drown in all of that. So, if you can, I had found there's a book called The Paper Solution, and it's by a woman named Lisa Woodruff. And she has a section in her book that talks specifically about special education paperwork that's generated and how best to organize and file it so that you can find it quickly when you need it. So, that would be one of the things I think. I still today am shuffling around papers from Steffi's school years. Mm-hmm. So I need to have a shredding party also, because I'm not going to need them anymore. Okay. But, truly, again, if you can find her, that book was called The Paper Solution, and it was Lisa Woodruff. She had some really excellent ideas on how to organize the papers.
Definitely keep a notebook.
Yeah.
Keep a medical notebook for those that have a lot of medical stuff. And I had one for medical, IPPs, which is regional center, and one for the school district. Mm-hmm. And you know, so it's all right there, and always had a sheet of one of those plastic sheets in there that you could put everybody's business cards in. So at a moment's notice, somebody can say, well, what was his doctor for this or PT for that? And you can turn right to it and it's there. And who's all the emergency numbers that you need and all those types of things. If it's all in one spot, you can just grab and go when you go to a meeting or something. And so you don't have to be scrambling, well, where was my IPP or where was the psychology report or that type of stuff. So, and then each year that I would take it out, put it in the box and then start the new year, you know, so then the box was full. So, yeah, that will help.
Yeah, that's fabulous. That was something we were thinking of also asking, but it just piggybacks on that, which is, you know, once you're in the school system and then you've got regional center and then you've got IHSS and Medi-Cal and all of that, it kind of all falls in line in the same, you know, you've got an annual meeting and you've got all this paperwork. So thank you so much for that advice. I know in our life that's been huge. So did we have any questions from the group come in?
And Kristen, real quick, I just wanted to add the IEP part too, because Steph was a special education teacher,
yes.
Classroom teacher. I'm currently an adapted PE teacher, so I'm a service provider at multiple schools and part of the IEP team. And something that I've noticed and that I would encourage parents is there is that IEP process, and there's that once a year you meet and you decide the goals and this and that, and that's one piece of it. And I think, in terms of return on investment, if there's anything that you can do to involve yourself, whether it's observing your kid in class or showing up to school and just having the teacher know that your eyes are on there, seeing if it's actually being followed through. And it doesn't have to be, like Sandy said, adversarial. It can just be, hey, I saw my kid in the classroom and they're doing something that looks really cool and works. I want to do that at home too. Or, hey, I'm doing things at home and my kids, it's working, and then I see them in the classroom and it's chaos, or it's what are we doing here, you know? And so I think if you can involve yourself in the process, and you know, special education teachers, some of them are amazing and, you know, cream of the crop, and like Sandy said too, there's a high burnout rate, and sometimes they're interns, or sometimes they couldn't get a job in their credential that they got, or this or that. And so, you know, go in there and be part of the solution, and also have the confidence that no one's a better teacher for your kid than you are. And you are going to know them the best and know what works and challenge them the best. So that's just something I would encourage. And the few times that I have seen that done in schools, it's gone a long way, because there is a huge gap between schools and parents. And it doesn't need to be the case. If you push for it, go look what they're doing in class, see what's working, see where they can be challenged. And then and that kind of gives that like zoom out big picture. You know, sometimes we can hyper focus on a number of service hours or a specific goal. But then what's the day-to-day look like, and what are they working towards for in the big picture of their life? So there's some thoughts.
Absolutely. Stephanie, sorry, go ahead.
There's actually a question that came in having to do with siblings. And since you guys are talking, maybe this is good. It says, I have a question about siblings. I feel like my typical kids take on so many extra responsibilities. How do I balance that? And how do I encourage my typical kids? So you're a sibling. How did maybe your parents do that? Because obviously you and your siblings didn't feel left out. You felt like it was a blessing to have Chris in your house.
I think empowerment too. I grew up, my sister had an IEP and she didn't have like very significant disabilities, but she had dyslexia and sensory processing. And so I grew up with a lot of therapies for her. There was a lot of attention on her. And I think that it wasn't really addressed. It was just kind of like, you know, Steph's got to figure this out and we're going to, you know, go to all these therapies with my sister. And so I think that something that may be helpful is just empowering that and just speaking life into your typical kids who, you know, may feel this is a lot, but they can do hard things. And this, you know, it's not, I just keep telling, you know, in our family, we just talk about worthy work, that, you know, things are hard, but it's worthy. and it's worthy of doing, and it's something that you may not be able to see the payout right now, but and it's hard when kids are little, and this feels like a lot, and I can't manage all of this, and it can become kind of competitive, like Lynette was saying, of competing for attention or for certain things, but just empowering them. And it takes a little bit extra as a mom of just taking that deep breath and putting yourself out of that, and just looking at those eyes looking back at you and just speaking life into them. So you guys are amazing just as parents, to be tackling the things that you are, and to spend your Monday night at 9:25 when your eyes are burning and you're tired, but it just shows a lot about your heart. So just hang in there, and you guys are doing great.
Yeah, I think you can also free your sibling children to not feel the weight. I was not only the firstborn, but I was the self-proclaimed firstborn that felt the weight of the world and thought that I had to fix everything. And I remember my mom telling me one time, she looked at me and said, "You're not responsible for my happiness." And I think I really believed I was. I really thought I was responsible for whether or not my mom was happy in a day, which was ridiculous, but that's, how especially a people pleaser type child functions. And so to, encourage your kids that, just if it's a difficult day with your special needs child, that's not their responsibility. And you guys know that, but I think sometimes just verbally saying that to a child who wants to please is a relief and an encouragement.
Yeah.
I think one thing too is to see how the sibling relationship. Our daughter absolutely adores our son, and to pour life into the son and say, look at who you are in her life. Look at what you mean to her. And you can't help but feel, special needs kids are so sincere in how they are. They don't manipulate like their peers. They're just unconditionally love, or Abby, she is what she is. She is what we all feel and just have enough constraint not to do. And so when she loves,
unfiltered.
Yeah. So when she loves somebody, which is about everyone, she shows it. And so to point that out to the sibling, to see, look how much you matter. Look what you do for their life. Look how much, you're doing. And then the other side of the coin is and Joey, your great example is the empathy towards people and the value towards people, of all people, as you go through life, by seeing the value in your brother, and having your parents obviously value that and not seeing it as a disability, but as such a strength. They grow up and see the world from a different lens than others, and they have the ability to love and empathize and be caring and nurture, and some of these characteristics that definitely aren't, like you say, it's not instant gratification. It's a long-term building for when they're adults, I think.
Yeah.
It's a long journey, not a short reward.
Yeah. I think it'd be nice to close with just sharing maybe one thing that you want to impart to this group, that you want to share with this group, just whatever it is, just one thing that you want as almost like a take home for the families.
Well, I'll jump in, go first. One of the things we didn't talk much about was the regional center. And
yes,
one of the things that we learned with Stephanie was, to get those regional center services. And I don't know where your children are in terms of whether they qualify or not qualify or whatever. But we, we went in when she was fairly young. We didn't get approved right away for regional center services, so we appealed. We went back and we should have been approved the first time. We weren't, but we got approved the second time, and it's been huge. And it's not really that important until you get out of the school system. But once you do, once you get out of the, out of transition or wherever, it's a huge piece. So don't wait on the regional center. Get that done, and then make the hard, controversial decision on conservatorship. That's a tough call. I can argue both sides, but we did it, and we're glad we did. But there's a lot to think about and a lot to go through with that, and address. Don't wait to address that concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Have a plan. I'm on the other end from where most of you are because my dad passed away 15 years ago and my mom 2 years ago. So I'm in a spot where I wish there had been more discussion. I wish I knew what my parents' wishes were and that I could be part of that. And the only thing I know is a couple weeks before my mom died, I just flat out asked her, what do you want for Missy? And she said, I want her to be as independent as possible. And that's proven to be difficult. And it has legally, emotionally, medically, everything involved has been a tough road the last 2 years. And so hopefully it's a ways off for most people, but I would just encourage you somewhere down the road, sooner than later, come up with a plan and involve the people that care about your child. Let them know, what your wishes are and how they can help support that.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that, for anyone approaching that time in life, Abby's 16, we're looking at conservatorship because of where her abilities lie in a couple of years. But Regional Center has a future planning class that I highly recommend, and it goes over all aspects of future planning, special needs wills, trusts, and conservatorship, residential, group home versus supported living, leisurely activities as they become adults, all those kinds of aspects of life, and making that plan, like you're saying, Lynette, is such a help to families. So definitely recommend that you just ask your service provider, basically. Yeah. So, Joey, would you have anything you would want to share, or Stephanie?
I think just what I did, or just, I think looking back, now my sister's 28 and I'm 30, and just, being able to see, like, I'm sure that my parents, stayed up late worrying about how our relationship was going to be, or, taking that weight off of one kid, and, so they don't feel a burden per se, or, I feel the weight of that. And just, there's grace in that too, that your kids are going to grow up, and the Lord knew, he knew exactly what they needed, and you were exactly what they needed, and their sibling was exactly what they needed. And so just resting in that truth, that you don't have to do it all, and, you don't have to worry about every little thing. You're already doing an incredible job just, by investing in them in the ways that you do. So yeah, just keep going.
Absolutely. Sandy, is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, the one thing I did say, number one, you are not alone. Everyone here is here for you. Number one, Jesus is always there for you. That is a given. He will never give us more than we can't handle, and he always provides what we need when we need it. Not before, but when we need it.
Yes.
And whether it's strength or finances or whatever it is, if it's something that he wants to do in our kids' lives, he will provide it. Mm-hmm. And rest in the fact, and open your hands with the fact that Jesus has a call on the life of your child, just like he does us. We're all a part of the body. Some more visible and pretty than others, but all of our our guys have a special purpose. And my son Jared, who's nonverbal, is in a group home, has the gift of unconditional love. I do not have that gift. He's in a group home. There's not much that he can do, but people just love him because he just shines the light of Jesus. And then there's Joel, who intensive speech therapy, all these different things. And he's an international speaker. We travel around the world, and he's an international artist in museums, and he writes books. And yeah, he's still autistic, but you know, he said, God, I need to go to China. I'm supposed to go to China. And I didn't say, you can't do that. I needed to be realistic. You know, like Lisette said, that we have to be realistic with what our kids is, but I wasn't going to go and say, you can't. I said, we need to pray and see what God has for your life. So pray with your kid what God has for each and every one of them, that he can be a light to shine through them in this dark, dark world, because he has a purpose, and each one of your precious children can be that light and shine for somebody in Jesus. And they will, because you're going to come across a lot of people in schools and all hurting people that are going to hurt. And you're going to be that light, that you can be realistic even when you're hurting, that you can say, but I go to Jesus even when I hurt, because they're going to see you and go, how do you make it? How do you be so strong? And you can be brave and say, it's Jesus. He helps me even when I'm tired, or even when I'm weary, or even when somebody said something stupid to me that has wounded me to the quick. Jesus is our rock and loves us and loves your kids so much. So just rest in that with him. Okay.